Hello, CX Inside Rockstars. Welcome to our new episode, The Way to Get Buy-in. Think like a CFO and present like a CMO by Kristin Luck. Welcome, Kristin.
Thanks for having me, Frank.
Let me introduce you really quick. Kristin is the actual president of ESOMAR and the founder of Scalehouse. Prior to launching her own business, she was the CMO of Decipher. She took the role in 2007 after receiving Decipher acquired her startup Forefront Consulting Group. She started her career in market research by working for Liebermann and ACNielson. So, Kristin, maybe let's start with your personal story, actually. How did you transform yourself from starting as a market researcher to now being an M&A advisor?
Yes, it is. It is an odd transformation. My career has had many twists and turns, and I think that I'm a good example of someone who likes to learn new things, and a testament that no matter how old you are, that you can always learn something new and take a new path. So yes, I started my career out at Liebermann Research Worldwide in Los Angeles. I was worked in data collection and analysis, and got really interested in online research back in sort of the late 90s. So now I'm aging myself officially. And this was, right at the advent of online research. And I was really interested in it. And Liebermann at the time was not going to go into the online space. And so I somehow convinced ACNielson to hire me to help build their first online research platform. So I sort of pivoted into a research and tech role, which, knowing nothing about online or technology, as you can imagine, was quite a learning curve for me. And then a few years after I joined Nielsen, I realized that a big company is a really tough place to run a business that's really a startup. And so another woman that was working at Nielsen in a sales role, she and I left and started a company called OTX, which actually became the fastest growing research firm in the world in 2002 and 2003, because we hit the dot-com boom just perfectly. We ended up selling that company to a private equity firm and then eventually to Ipsos. Then I started a data visualization and data collection platform that I, as you mentioned, sold to Decipher back in 2007. And then we sold Decipher to Focus Vision in 2014. And ironically, now I'm back working with the Focus Vision team. I now sit on the board of Forsta, which is the combined entity for Confirmit and Focus Vision, which merged just this last year. So I've come full circle. But yes, after I left Decipher, I had an opportunity to really figure out what I wanted to do next. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what I really loved, and what I realized I really loved is I didn't really like the starting of companies so much. I really loved the scaling of them and every challenge and hurdle that comes with growing companies. And so that's how Scalehouse came to be. And then I went and got my investment banking license in 2019 so that I could legally do M&A work within the US and globally. And so now I also work as an M&A advisor as part of my scaling practice. So it has been a very long and very diverse career.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that of course you sold so many companies. Obviously, you need to know something about this, right?
Yeah, I think, and I think it's interesting, for most of the folks that work in M&A in this sector, marketing, technology, and services, most of them have never started a company themselves. They haven't worked in the business, so they don't really understand the insights business, nor have they been a founder. And so I think I bring a really unique perspective to the M&A process, because I've gone through it through both sides now, both as a seller, a buyer, and now as an investment banker.
Cool. Yeah, so I think I saw you in person 2 years ago at the ESOMAR conference in Edinburgh.
Yes.
And you were host and moderator. Yeah, you were moderating.
Our last in-person event.
That was fun. That was fun. I hope this will come soon back.
Yes. Hopefully.
So you were moderating this session. I think it was the name, right? Think like a CFO and act like a CMO. Was this? No.
I actually moderated a session that was it was about M&A trends in market research. However, my favorite keynote of that conference was a talk by Chris Burgrave. And it was about his book that he had put out, but he had a line from that presentation called "Think Like a CFO, Present Like a CMO" that really resonated with me, because I think one of the biggest challenges that insights professionals have, whether you're in CX or in market research, is that we tend not to look holistically at the bigger picture of what's going on in a company and the overall company's performance, which is how a CFO thinks. They think, what's the ROI on this investment, or how are we going to increase profitability, or how are we going to increase revenue? Nor do we tend to present like a CMO. We tend to show our clients lots of slides of data charts and give very long explanations, rather than thinking about what's the impact on the company's marketing or marketing spend, and what's the net result that we're delivering, whether that's saving a company time or saving it money.
Yeah. So how in more detail would CX Insight professional, what should he do to really think like a CFO, maybe act like a CFO, but then present like a CMO?
Yeah. Well, I think the first is, and I see this happen in a lot of companies, is that there's too much focus on individual projects and not enough focus on strategy. And so as researchers, we have a tendency just to get focused really on an individual project without taking the time to understand what the overall company strategy is, which is what will ultimately allow you to understand what the financial objectives for the company are, which is how a CFO thinks. So, doing more strategic account planning, asking more questions about what the company's overall objectives are, I think is a really important part of the research process that generally researchers tend to skip over in favor of specifics about projects.
So what you're suggesting is step out of what people ask you to do. Do this, but actually do something in addition to that. Ask yourself not just what my stakeholders want for me right now, in terms of projects, but ask yourself, what does a company want? And basically do more proactive approach, maybe even suggest certain approaches, suggest certain projects.
Yeah, I think it's not just, I think having, asking questions about what the company's overall objectives are and what their revenue objectives are, I think is important. I think that gives you a better understanding of what the goals are for the company versus just getting the project specifications and trying to complete a project without really understanding how that project ultimately ties into the overall objectives of the company. And I think that's something that's sort of built into big consulting. So if you worked for a McKinsey or a Bain, for example, or BCG, those types of questions are sort of inherent and part of your process. It's less so on the market research or CX side of the business, where again, I think we tend to think a little too project specific. And so because of that, we don't ever really get into strategic conversations about our clients' businesses.
Actually, this title and this quote reminds me to the last episode, actually, where Thomas Barta, marketing leadership guru, he said, actually, act like a CFO. And what he meant by that is basically the CFOs, they have the power for a reason, because they provide transparency how everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And he says, actually, in CX Insights, we have the data too, right?
We do.
If we can provide something, if we can act like a CFO, basically telling everyone how he's doing, and then therefore providing pressures to others, you would become more powerful if you play it like a CFO. Is this in line with your message?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So so then if you then start thinking in terms of strategy, what should you do to sell your insights, your work as an insight professional? How do you sell it, or what are the mistakes people are doing there?
Yeah, well, this is where the present like a CMO, I think, comes into play. I think oftentimes we tend to get too data centric with our presentations, and that's not to say that we shouldn't share data, but I think shorter presentations, more visual presentations, ones where we're not just showing data table after data table after data table, are really important, and being able to show things in an interactive and more visual way. And I'll tell you a funny story from the early stages of my career. I was working in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. So I worked in entertainment research at the beginning of my career. And I can remember I went into 20th Century Fox at the time to give a presentation to the CMO and their research team about some movie testing that we had conducted. And I remember I maybe was 3 or 4 slides into my presentation, and the CMO got up from his desk, he laid down on the floor, and he said, "Wake me up when the data is over." And it was probably one of the more horrifying moments of my career, because I had about another 30 or 40 slides of data. I was kind of, woefully unprepared for that comment. But it was a good lesson to me that, we need to be more creative about how we deliver, the results of our research. And we also have to understand too, that not everyone comes from a really data-centric background. Now, given that, when I gave that presentation, it was, in the early 2000s, and marketing was quite a bit different than it is now. Now, most CMOs are very data-centric. They are very, well-versed in how to translate and manage data, and they use data very heavily to inform their marketing spend. But back in those days, that certainly wasn't the case. That said, I do think that we're fortunate now that we live in a time where there are lots of reporting dashboards and more interactive ways and more always on opportunities for folks to access data in a way that's more meaningful to them than just very long PowerPoint reports, which is what I used to deliver.